Yes. Every day, Charles. Every day, remember?
Well, the question that comes, the key question that will tell you where you stand on this debate is, if you accept the non-aggression principle, how far do you take it in organizing society? Where do you draw exceptions? I don't think it would be very acceptable in this, or in any group, for me to pull out a gun and say to Vern, you must contribute to my favorite charity or I'm going to shoot you. Right? Wouldn't go over very well. Is it acceptable for a group of people then to do the same thing? Answer that question and you find out where you stand on limited government or any kind of government versus anarchy. And I think I'm going to leave you with that challenge.
Which side are you on?
I just posed that question to get you guys thinking.
I think you're on their side.
We'll take it.
This is going to be a hard debate because I'm on their side most of the time also. We were debating this last night a little bit, and my question then would be, the principles of voluntarism, or maybe anarchy, are good. Total freedom, no force. However, there are those who live among us, as I stated earlier, who don't hold those same principles. They would be willing to take by force. And when those outnumber or are organized enough to outnumber us individually, what do? And maybe government is necessary, especially at this time in our nation's history, when there are nations who would love to have our country, our territory. Could we, with our sniper rifles, hold them off if they have tanks and airplanes and bombs? And that's
or sheer numbers.
So if we do need some kind of organized government, military, what are the limits? And maybe we can do the voluntary thing and just let those others get dropped on the bombs, but I'm not sure bombs are selective.
All right, and my take on that, the national defense issue, is my argument is not that tomorrow we elect me president of the anarchic United States. That's kind of oxymoronic. It's not a change that I'm expecting to have happen tomorrow. What I'm hoping is that these other countries that have bombs that they want to drop right now, that somewhere there's a Liberty Fest going on. Perhaps the town is named Landeroni or something like that. And people are spreading ideas and saying, hey, we could be without government, except those people over in Lander might drop bombs on us. So we better get even more and bigger bombs so that they don't do that. My ideas, and anarchy isn't going to be perfect. Anarcho-capitalism, there's not going to be this utopia where everything is perfect. Might it be better than 262 million people dying in a 100-year span? Might it be better than 50% of the products of our labor being stolen from us? Might it be better than what we have now? I think so. We might not get down to 100% perfection, but I think it would be an improvement. So these ideas are simply those. It's an idea. It's something philosophically I challenge us all to think about and come up with logical solutions to. Anarcho-capitalism is one of them, voluntarism.
I agree with Shep here, of course. I am on his side. You have to have principles in mind if you're going to go anywhere. That needs to be in your sights, or else you'll never, ever get there. As far as defense, like I said in my speech, America is very unique in our geography. And I really don't see legions of tanks ever being able to make it to our shores. It'd be very easy to stop any kind of landing boat in its tracks with mines or anything like that. So strategically, I'm not too worried about hordes of foreigners coming to our shores. And I don't think they really have any incentive because they have to be an occupation force for what used to be, and I'm sure could still be, the most armed populace in the world. A lot of people credit the fact that Japan never invaded us for that very reason, because they would have no way of really occupying or holding us. If there was organization, and there probably would be some type of organization necessary for some type of defense against those things just in case, that's fine, as long as you don't have to steal from people in order to do it. And I know bombs aren't selective, but there's all sorts of ways you can protect yourself from that on an individual level. Bunkers, if it were really necessary, you could build your own bunker and not get bombed. Or live in a place that wasn't necessarily very urban. If you're very scared of bombs, live in Wyoming, where there's no concentrated population center for another Air Force to firebomb.
So we've each had a couple minutes chat. What are we missing? Drake.
Years ago, back in Maryland, when there was an organization that another group didn't like the direction they were going, they'd pack the meeting and they'd vote for changes and that sort of thing. And I feel like that's what's happening to this country vis-a-vis the illegal immigration. We're just literally going to, if we get inundated enough with people that consider this unrepatriated land to Mexico, we're just by default going to become part of another country.
Yes, sir, Lloyd.
He's talked about people coming in and taking us over. We've already been taken over. We are a communist nation, a communist dictatorship from taking over from the inside. The Jekyll Island deal that took over our land, and the IRS and the CFR, they rule our country. They threaten and have every political office of importance in the United States. The only way we have is from the sheriff's standpoint. He's the officer here. He can keep them out. But we're not talking about establishing a government or establishing freedom. It's already gone. I'm the only one in this audience who was born free. I was born in 1911. We lost it in 1913.
I have a question for you anarchists. How do you handle the atomic bomb problem? Can every person have their own atomic weapons?
That's what John thinks.
Why not?
John
No,
thinks everybody has.
this brings up a question of procedure. I think it is incumbent on those who would limit freedom to justify their stance.
Amen.
Why not, Don?
Because one crazy person could kill 50 million others.
I can make the same argument for the handguns. Well, I don't see one on your hill.
No, you can't.
Not 50 million, obviously.
I can make an argument of 50 million. There's a difference between personal defense and mass destruction of atomic weapons, which under Shepard and Neema's world would be allowed to be given to every crazy person, every crazy person in the world would be allowed to procure, build, maintain, use, get ready to use their own atomic weapons. If there was no government to control these people, my theory would be there would be a few of them who would use them, and utopia would disappear in a big mushroom cloud.
Don, I think you're describing the situation we have now, unless you want to tell me that George Bush and Nikita Khrushchev were sane.
The reality is we have...
And it wasn't it a government that gave us the nuclear bomb?
We have 50 years of history that have proven that governments have much more to lose than one crazy individual has to lose. And therefore, what if Timothy McVeigh would have had a 50 megaton warhead? Okay? The problem with not having government is that you do need some level of protection as a community from the crazies on the outside, as far as Neema's argument is concerned with regard to our wonderful location of being separate from the shores. Very quickly, the United States would devolve into multiple little worlds, and the multiple little worlds would each end up fighting with each other. So you're living in a mixed world of trying to use an overlay of today versus your utopia.
But what incentive would people have to faction off and fight each other? If they didn't have the structure.
Wyoming would leave in a heartbeat if they could.
Of course, but we wouldn't necessarily have to fight.
No, we just leave. But the point is, at that point in time, it's no longer American.
Okay.
I tend to fall somewhere between the two there. And you brought up the atomic bomb. If everybody had an atomic bomb, the largest weapon of mass destruction in the world today is the AK-47. More than twice as many people a year die at the end of an AK-47 than died in both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bomb blasts.
But the difference is it took 100 million people to pull triggers. It only takes one person to set off a nuclear weapon.
Dave Dawson, I believe, wanted to speak.
Well, I begin by saying that somehow I don't feel a great deal safer knowing that our government, the only institution having ever done that twice, is protecting me from that. So you haven't scared me enough, Don. Beyond that, I want to quibble only over one word. I've never been comfortable with the necessary argument for government, and I'd like to suggest that rather than necessary, which implies a moral imperative, could we use inevitable? My worldview prevents me from being an anarchist because I just believe that there will always, even if we were able to somehow kick all governments out and they cease to exist, that there will always be those people who believe they are anointed to manage other people's lives, and the first thing they would do is start a government in order to do that. So
Tony
I'm
Soprano.
not
Tony Soprano is a prime example.
Pardon?
Tony Soprano.
Okay, well, whoever. You don't have to be Italian. But I think it's inevitable. That's the only reason I'm not an anarchist, is that I think that government is inevitable, and I see the best that we can do is simply damage control, prevent the damage that the government does.
I would like to respond to that just briefly. And I completely agree. Evidently someone else came up with that. Don and I actually had that discussion over beer once that, instead of calling it necessary, we'd call it inevitable. I completely agree that it is. I view this as a battle of the mind, not a battle of politics. And if we had been having this meeting 150 years ago or 300 years ago, we could have all agreed to the rule of thumb, right? We have a right to discipline our wives, but we just need to make sure the stick is smaller than our thumb.